Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. Today we have another wheel experiment for you guys, and that is playing around with the connector wheels but with other materials, wheels, and blocks. Alright, so before we begin, as promised, if you hit 100 likes in the previous experiment video, I'll show you guys exactly how I connected these together, which was a big pain in the you-know-what. So, the way I connected it, I initially just built out the whole entire thing, right? So, basically all this, for the small grid one, it was pretty much all connected kind of like that, in a sense. So that's how I kind of built it out, really. It worked out pretty well for the small grid, but if you did a mixture of the large grid and the small grid, that's where it gets into some problems. But the other thing is copying and pasting it was a pain, because in order to put the wheels, it's locked if you build it the way I just explained it. And of course, when you unlock it, everything folds down. So let's just say unlock, that's what happens. And with the strength, it's a give or take. Sometimes it blows up, like so, and sometimes it doesn't. So what I've been doing is pretty much hit or miss. I kept on constantly do that in the very beginning to see if I can get it to work or not. So I just kept on unlocking, play with different strings, and playing with different strings does work out a little bit. See, that one blew up 2 wheels instead of that 1 wheel. And again, if I play with different types of strength on the connectors, that's pretty much at 100%. We did 20%, which I think is my sweet spot for it. Sometimes it works again, sometimes it doesn't. So that's where my pain points were building this type of connector wheels. But as of today, I found out the best way to do it. I guess it's never too late to really figure it all out. So today I've been actually working around it, and I actually put like 0.5. Seems to work really well. So if I do unlock, let it connect, and it should be okay. As you see here, it's a little bit floppy, as you see there, but of course you can always do the connections back to 100% or 20% as I like it. And 20% is still a floppy because the other outer wheels are not connected too well as in that sense, because they're 0.5. So we have to individually change them as well to make it less floppy. So that would be, for an example. Alright, so all 20% on the outer wheels and the outer connectors and the inner connectors, it becomes less floppy there. So it does kind of matter of your inner connectors and outer connectors to be at a certain connection point. So you can't leave it too weak on one side versus the other. You could probably get away with 10 and maybe 5%, but at 0.5 and a 20, it seems to be a little too floppy in that sense. So that's how I did it with the small grid. The large grid, however, that one was more of a pain because I couldn't build out the connectors connected together already, because, you know, a small grid versus a large grid happens. Right now, you see here, it's a connection point like this, just to kind of hold it up so I can connect it and release it. So basically, with it connected, it would look like that. And with that built out section here, I can unlock it. And it's a little bit down. And it connects pretty well. So let's just do that again because it was hard to see in that sense. So here's locked. We unlock it, and it stands still pretty well because the way I station everything, and it becomes unlocked that way, which is not the way I built it, but that's how I duped it, basically, or made copies of it. But to make it, what I actually did was pretty much got rid of all this. So let's just remove these. So basically, the way I made it initially, let's see if I can lock it, unlock to drop. There we go. Alright, so the initial way how I did this is basically something like that without the explosion. I made the base, and then I dropped the large connector and then the large battery, or, you know, large bit battery. And then I used a piston to lift it up a little bit. And I used a vehicle, or like similar to a forklift, to carry out the wheels and pushed it against the connectors, but at low connection strength. So that's how I made the large grid ones. But of course, there's easy ways to do that. And I did this instead. So I just created a small little piston system going up, horizontal, and down with a landing gear. So you can easily lift it up and down and edit with the wheels instead of doing what I did, which is a lot easier in that sense. But of course, the initial connection should be a low strength. And then when you lock it in and when you're close together and it's kind of like doing the yellow thing, you can increase the strength in that sense. But make sure it's fairly close. If it's not too close, it's gonna connect too hard and smash your system. So again, that's how I did it. It's much easier with a system like this, a very simple system, and a little bit of a help from a forklift type vehicle, which was this buggy here, that I was able to lift up, push, and connect it to that. So that's the way I created. Alright, so on to what we wanted to do today. So as you see here, I have a few builds with these connector wheels that are similar to what we did previously with different materials and blocks, but with rotors and suspensions with rotor head mod. And of course, I tried to do a flaming wheel, which didn't work out well, as you see here, because the exhaust does not even touch the ground, and it just pretty much exploded in that sense, because it's just becoming a bit of a hovercraft or just grinding on the floor, basically. What definitely would have been cool if you could see it spin. I mean, you could probably do it in certain other ways, but that specific one did not work out. But before we go on to these guys here to see how well they work, Splitsy, who we are big fans of, actually commented in our previous video and mentioned if only we could use suspension wheels because it does have bonus damage protections. That would have been nice to have it against the connectors. But you know what? I thought, why not stick some suspension with the wheels onto the connectors and see what happens. So with the small grid one, I decided to put a 3x3 wheel right here. And what I did to kind of even it out is the height offset to be 0, so that it's right in the middle, strength about 20%, just to give it some extra suspension. But the problem with this is that it does not touch the ground whatsoever. And of course, you can play with the height offset. If we did that, it is gonna touch the ground, but kind of spin in a weird way and pretty much destroy the system. So this was a bit of a fail. Didn't work out well at all. So we move on to the next thing. So the next one, of course, we did this. And this is a 5x5 small grid wheel with the suspension connected to the connector. Because it connects under 4 square or 4 blocks. It's very off of the middle of it. So, of course, if I built it out bigger, it could probably even out somehow. Probably not, to be honest. But this thing actually works okay. It's not too bad. So, as you see here, it's actually rotating a bit, kind of smashing the ground ever so slightly here and there. But we can't always see how well this works in terms of speed. So, let's add on our thrusting override. Here we go. So we have a thrust override going forward. And we're going to launch it as much as we can and see how fast we can go before it either blows up or how well the connectors stay connected. They are set at 20%, which is kind of my sweet spot, as I mentioned before, which works pretty well. So controlling this is a bit of a pain because you see how much it was wobbling. But it's actually not blowing up just quite yet. And of course, as I said that, it does. So that was at about 14 meters per second. And now I pretty much lost everything. So that's just gonna glide on through without any wheels. So close to, I would say 14 meters per second. It worked out pretty well with that kind of suspension. But of course, instead of using 5x5 wheels, why not use a rotor system? So what I did here is have the connectors connected to a rotor that's connected to a wheel, but it's more of a wheel block and not a suspension wheel. And of course, each rotor is set at 0 torque. So we can kind of see how quickly this thing goes before it breaks, which I think is actually going to last pretty well in terms of speed. It is rotating, well, it's pretty slowly. It's not too bad. Oh yeah, and a bit of an update. They did add piston heads that are usable now. So you can just kind of plop them on like hubcaps onto wheels if you like. Previously, the way to do it is probably do it in like a copy and paste if you drop the piston head off of the piston itself. Alright, so it looks like we're heading close to 30 meters per second and nothing's breaking. What's spinning more than ever is actually the rotors more than the connectors, which is interesting. We could probably increase the speed a little bit before it blows up because it is bouncing. So let's just try it. Okay, so this is actually holding up really well. It's bouncing a bit. Oh, it blew up at about 47 meters a second. But I think if I went slower, it could have lasted a little longer. But that worked out surprisingly well. Interesting. Huh. Alright, so the last one we have here, of course, it is a large grid wheel suspension system under a small grid thing here. So this one is going to be a off-road or any wheel, 3x3 suspension wheel, connected to a battery, connected connector to a small connector, and see how this runs. So this one's similar as the other wheel suspension. Height offset is at 0, strength is at 20%, and we can pretty much push this thing to go as fast as we can because we only have one thruster on this one, and we're probably slowly gonna pick up speed. But this thing looks pretty crazy. It's a little bit wide. I should make it a little longer to make it more effective, but I want to test out if it works well with the wheels. So it looks like using a 3x3 large grid wheel works better on this kind of system on a small grid base than it did with the small grid with small grid. So this one, look at that spin on these wheels. It's going crazy, but we are going at 40 meters per second plus. Nothing's breaking. It's not falling off the connectors. Wheels are spinning. I can't tell if its connectors are spinning more than the suspension wheels itself, but a bit of a rotisserie thing going on here, and we're going pretty fast. And I think we have enough space. We can go even faster. We could probably hit 100 meters per second, to be honest. Not sure if that is going to be the case, and I do want to kind of figure that out if I can find a way to turn this, not hit a tree. Ow. That slowed us down a bit. And let's see if I can plop on... Oh, I just slowed down everything. Let's see if I can just plop on another thruster. I think I might need additional batteries too. So let's just put on a ton of small little batteries. Okay, there you go. So let's turn off the thrusting override. Where is that one thruster? Alright, thrusting override's off. And let's try to spin this without breaking anything just yet. And I think we can find a nice square path here. So we have 3 thrusters going forwards. We're going to push it to the max ourselves by going forward, pressing forward. It's a slow crawl, not too bad. And yeah, that's not bad at all. We hit 70, we're going to 80, hitting 90, and we're at 100, or at least close to it. 100 meters per second, pretty much close to it, and it's rolling pretty well. Not a lot of bounce. This is actually pretty interesting. Turning it is a little bit of an issue. I mean, slowly is fine, but if you do it too quickly, it might blow up. Hitting a tree is not ideal, which I'm about to do. And oh, I can save it. I can save it. Saved it. And nope, I didn't save it. So, all right. So of course, this system works out pretty well, as interesting as it is. And of course, the connectors were spinning more than the wheels. All right, so we tested it, and it looks like it works out pretty well with unconnected connectors with large grid wheels and wheel suspensions. But what if we just, you know, locked the connectors? Will we be able to go and get the similar effect or a different effect? So the main problem I see here is that the wheels are not upright the right way. So the suspension is probably not going to be ideal in terms of the bounce of it. So that's probably going to be your biggest problem. I think I'm getting most of my power or forward momentum from the thruster. So if I turned it off, am I still able to turn the wheels? Alright, so driving with connectors locked seems to be okay. Just make sure you don't press the wrong button like I just did. But for the most part, let's see. If we lock it without thrusters, I don't think we can move it forward. Yeah, because it becomes, I guess, a subgrid in a way. So that doesn't work. But I believe a script can maybe fix that. Maybe, not too sure. But yeah, you definitely need a thruster in order to make this work, it looks like. But of course, we can always throw on a thruster here. Alright, just throw on one large, small grid thruster and just go forward. And you see here, we're getting a good push in momentum forward. We can spin it a little easier without worrying about it falling off the connectors. And we hit 100 pretty quickly. And of course, if you really wanted to, we can hit unlock and see what happens in 3, 2, 1. So that's unlocked and everything just blew up in my face. So that's not ideal in any ways. But definitely suspension wheels on a connector that's unlocked, that's kind of connected, actually works surprisingly well. But of course, there has to be that combination of a small grid base connected to a 3x3, or you could probably do 5x5, but 5x5 connects to a bigger space than one large block, which is why I use the 3x3. So that actually works out pretty well. And if you make it a longer wheelbase, probably lengthwise, it might actually look like a decent vehicle. But talking about decent vehicles, as you've seen in the previous videos, I tried these with rotors. I tried it with suspension wheels that has a using a mod to connect a rotor head to make these kind of weird shapes and things. So I want to try a little bit of newer shapes, and of course, in order to round out the corner, these types of blocks. These slope blocks, I had to make it kind of like this because I couldn't round it out unless I made a larger. Actually, no, it has to be kind of small to make a bit of a rounded out shape. So, for an example, here's your kind of rounded out shape here with these slopes. So that's a perfect circle, but that's a tiny wheel, so we can't use that, to be honest, with this kind of system. So this becomes a bit of an issue. So we made small wheels on here on a square to see what happens. So everything here is pretty much the same thruster wise. There's one or two depending on the system. Actually, you know what? Why not just make it all equal? Let's throw in 2 thrusters each for this guy. And the connectors, again, 20% on both sides, inner and outer. And see if this kind of works. It kind of works in terms of vehicle momentum forward. It's a little bit bouncy, which is a problem. I'm just pressing forward a little bit so nothing breaks. But so far, we're about 8 meters per second. Well, we were at about 8 meters per second, and nothing's breaking just yet. But it is bouncing a lot more heavier in that way. But if we keep pushing it, it does that. Oh wow! The shapes actually just fell right off of it. But yeah, this vehicle still works. It's like a hovercraft in a way, but it does blow up because it just grinds off the floor. But that shape is a bit too bouncy for what we can use that for. So next one, of course, we want to use some blast doors or blast door corners. I was hoping to round it out, but again, you can't really round these things out because they're a bit sharp in terms of like in terms of the shape itself. So it's gonna make more of a square than anything else. So putting this together, it obviously, you know, it's too long and it doesn't really spin too well. And of course that blew up fairly quickly, but it does spin a little bit in that sense. As you see there, it spins here and there, but it'll tend to blow up fairly quickly. So the next thing is, why not add some lights? So I added a whole bunch of these corner lights in this vertical position, in this horizontal position. One, it looks pretty damn cool, and two, it actually works fairly well. I guess it doesn't. One, it looks really cool, and two, it really doesn't work. It doesn't grind on the floor. It doesn't have any traction whatsoever. So it just becomes a bit like the base where it's just hovering a little bit. So, I mean, if you go fast enough, it's definitely going to blow up. Actually, no, it's actually not too bad. It'll spin a little bit. But I think if we got even faster, there you go. It'll blow up. But yeah, that build with the lights really does look cool. But too bad it doesn't catch any traction on the floor with it. So that definitely doesn't work out too well. So of course, we use the half block slope blocks here. Just to kind of give it some kind of traction. And I gotta say, it does look pretty cool too. It does give a bit of traction, as you see here. It does glide a bit too. I should probably face it the other way instead. But either way, it's gonna make this kind of bounce, which is the biggest problem. The more bouncy it is, the more, you know, chances that it's gonna kind of break. So it looks interesting. It can get some speed, but again, once it kind of goes a little too fast, it's just gonna break. So those are some extra designs for connector wheels, but of course failed designs, of course. Failed designs, so I wouldn't advise using it. I mean, if you wanted to, the best thing you probably can do again is use the small grid base with the large grid with the 3x3 wheel suspensions. Ideally, you probably want to make it a lot longer to make it look nicer, but I gotta say, that worked out pretty well, which is something I wasn't expecting. And it actually did reach 100 meters per second, which is very, very surprising. Alright, so thank you guys very much for watching my random experiment. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up, like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, hit that notification bell, and of course we would appreciate it if you left some comments. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.